It's good to be back in Kennewick, the second conference after the one last year that was held here about the NAWAPA project. I'm going to talk about the Bering Strait Tunnel project and the recent conference that was held in Yakutsk in the Sakhalin Republic in Russia on August 17th and 19th. What this conference really represented was a reversal of the conventional economic thinking of the financial interests of the world. And it's a return to development and prosperity and a revulsion against austerity and decline. The ultimate purpose of the conference was to develop a pathway by which we can connect Asia and North America between Russia and the United States by way of the Bering Strait. This is a critical geopolitical shift because it's going to force a shift from an Atlantic orientation to a Pacific. This whole project would really expand our infrastructure, and it would create jobs, and it would create economic development, and we would get rid of our present budget problem that we have, which is a complete lack of economic activity, and change that totally. Now, the financial side was discussed extensively at this conference, and the issue of money was a very major issue. We have to provide financing for railway development. We have to provide financing for electrical infrastructure. We have to provide monies for mining. We need to have a cooperative relationship between Russia, China, the United States, and India and others, which is based on a credit system as compared to a monetary system. Because the credit system would be controlled by the people and the governments. The monetary system is controlled by the bankers, and we've all seen the destruction of the world that they have undertaken with their present policies. So we need to orient lending and financing for the physical economy only, with the elimination of speculative financial activities and instruments, a la derivatives. And we need to implement the Glass-Steagall Act, and we have to have fixed exchange rates between countries, which that would help bring about. Now, this particular conference was sponsored by the government of the Sakhalin Republic, which is the largest of the 89 political subdivisions in Russia. It's 1.5 times the size of Alaska. It has a population of approximately 1.2 million people. Its capital is Yakutsk, which is a city of 250,000 people. I was there in 1996. And it's in the region which has the largest mineral resources development in Russia, and indeed the world. And it's a center of the diamond and gold mining in Russia. Now, the Russian Academy of Sciences helped sponsor the conference, the Ministry of Economics, a very important organization called the Council for the Study of Productive Forces, which really is meaning economic development, and the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Russia, which is a business organization. The major speakers were Victor Raspagan, who heads this Council for the Study of Productive Forces. While he's not a member of the LaRouche organization, he certainly is sympathetic to it. His boss, Alexander Granberg, who was the earlier and still continues to be the primary person for development of economic development policy for northeastern Russia. Vladimir Yakunin, who I met in May in New York, and also in Germany in early 2010. They are completing the development of the first section of the railway going between the city of Tinda and the Amur Republic and across the river from Yakutsk. So their first project should be finished in 2013. They've already decided they will build the second section from Yakutsk, 1,100 miles to the northeast to Magadan, which is on the coast, and then from a place called Magadan to Agnikinat, which is in the Chukotka region, which is the region across the Bering Strait from Alaska, and then completing the last 300 miles to Ulan at the Bering Strait, directly across from Wales, which is 53 miles away, with 2 islands in the middle. So Russia has a orderly development plan. Now the plan is they will get this completed by 2030, all the way to the Bering Strait, under the present circumstances unless there is an acceleration of development. And that means Russia and China and the United States and Canada enter into some type of cooperative relationship. Well, what's been the attitude of the Obama administration about this? Well, they want to create Beringia National Park, not only on the islands, but on the coast of the mainland, on the Seward Peninsula, for the specific purpose of preventing the Bering Strait Tunnel from being built. Now, this goes right along with the earlier policy of creating the Darien National Park, which David talked about a few minutes ago, in southern Panama, on the border with Colombia, for the specific purpose of preventing the completion of the Pan-American Highway and the Inter-American Railway. Now this sounds like a real responsible policy, doesn't it? But they don't talk about it, but basically that's the policy, and the entire western coast of Alaska would be basically off limits to oil and gas development. And of course the real idea is to create a national park along the entire coastline so there would be no development. That's the plan. It isn't publicized, but that's the plan. Now, when you connect all this together, you realize what the political and regulatory situation is. And of course, a lot of this would have already happened if it hadn't been for opposition from Republicans on the basis of anti-environmentalism. So what David said about environmentalism, and I know he's going to have more to say about this later today, this is a critical situation. Now, how do we stop this? Well, when I know myself, I've told a number of people about this, both here in this country and elsewhere, about the Beringia National Park and the Bering Strait Tunnel. Boy, they get the connection real fast, and they said, what the hell are we doing this for? Okay. And you have a similar situation in Canada with the creation of your many national parks, all of them at strategic locations to prevent development, right? Okay. Now, when the Russians plan to build out to the Bering Strait, they're going to have a northern route, which going by the city of, or not much of a city, it's called Zhiryanka. It used to be a gold mining place. And the southern route by way of Oymyakon, so they can have a branch going to Magadan. But there's an orderly program. Now, they've been facing the same problem of budget cuts as we have in their government. And in fact, the Ministry of Finance under Sergei Kudrin was really trying to minimize, if not eliminate, the funding for the railway extension in northeastern Russia. Well, a number of people went to work, and they've discussed this in the article about that. So they're fighting somewhat the same battle we are. Now, on specific railroad projects, the existing Trans-Siberian Railway between Moscow and Vladivostok is basically at capacity over the entire route, 100 trains a day or so. It was electrified. That was completed in 2003. The last sections between Skobrodino and Khabarovsk in the east, about 1,200 miles, is in the process of being double-tracked. But what they need is a 4-track railroad, not a 2-track. And we're facing the same problem with our rail infrastructure in the United States. In spite of our economy, there's been a big shift of intermodal traffic from road to rail. And the railroads are getting more business, and it's to the point now where they're having to expand more. The Burlington Northern Santa Fe, of course, is almost completing with its double track from Chicago to Los Angeles. They're now they're actually started on putting a 3rd track in. And we're going to need to have this and much more. But they have, in Russia, they have a very orderly plan for doing this, but they're talking about building high-speed rail lines along a certain point. I was just reading yesterday in one of the transportation magazines that they're now talking about a high-speed container freight line in Russia. When you look at the actual speed, it isn't that high, but the fact that they're talking about doing it and having a plan for doing it says good for them. The northern route, the Baikal-Amur Magistral, which was finished in the early 1980s, not in the best condition, single track, didn't have a lot of traffic because they didn't connect it at the eastern end. It needs to connect to Sakhalin Island. They're in the process of starting to rebuild that and expand it and tie in more mineral and coal development, especially the Elginskoye mining area in the southeastern Tsar Republic. The Seversky Siberian rail line is another one that's being expanded. So they do have an orderly plan, and they are making investments. Of course, they have a government-owned railroad, but they are looking for private capital to help them, because they have to not only expand the railroad, but they've got to completely replace a large part of their existing freight car and locomotive rolling stock. Now, the situation in the United States and North America is very different than Russia. There is no organized plan, except we want to create a national park to prevent development. Alaska, the state, has made some efforts. They're talking about building a road out to Nome now, and there's been periodic talk of building a railroad. They have a corridor established in between Fairbanks and the border with the Yukon for a railroad. They are building between Fairbanks and Delta Junction. But there's a real push going to be on for oil and gas development in northern Alaska. Now, the environmental restrictions that exist need to be removed. In fact, one of the best ways that we could help facilitate all the things we're talking about is assuming there is a change in either Barack comes to reality, which I don't think is going to happen, or he's removed, but then assuming you don't get Republicans that are even worse, is we have to eliminate the restrictions on energy development anywhere on our coast or interior in North America. And we don't need any Beringia National Park. The cost of building all this project is something like on the order of $125 billion if you're going to connect everything up between Russia and North America. Well, compare that to the fact we've been spending more on that in war in Iraq every year. The state of Washington would be a beneficiary, although other states are going to be getting more benefit from building the railroad than we are. But I think as far as NAWAPA is concerned, this entire region of the northern and northwestern United States is going to be a major beneficiary. And of course, Alaska is going to be a real focal point for development. And we need to build electric transmission, electric generation. NAWAPA helps do that. It provides water, and it provides a number of other benefits for all that we're trying to accomplish. And I think that it's very fortuitous that this meeting is taking place today, and there's this renewed interest, and there is this conference that is taking place which can provide the beginning of the pathway for us developing this relationship between the United States, Canada, Russia, China to develop this project.